This afternoon. This is the continuation of the U.S. Embassy conference, Smart People for Smart Economies. Minister, very pleased to have you here this afternoon to join us. And I'm going to kick it over to Tony. I think first we'll hear a little bit about Wayra, and then we'll jump right into it.
Thanks very much. Welcome, everybody. I'm just going to hand you over to Carl so we can have a chat about Wayra.
Thanks, Tony. Firstly, welcome to Wayra. It's great to see so many people here today, and I hope you had a good session in the marker earlier on. Just very briefly about Wayra, we're a startup accelerator funded by Telefonica, and we work with very early stage companies. We invest in them, and we accelerate their business through this workspace here. They come in for 9 months, and we work with them to drive the acceleration of their business to the point where they've gained customers, they have a product, and they're able to engage with investors. Our goal is very clearly to create highly investable businesses, and that is something that we've been quite successful at doing here in Ireland. We've made 21 investments, 2 in EdTech. Tony with one with Gotcha Ninjas, and the other is Thoughtbox. From our perspective, we look at creating a portfolio of companies where we've made some investments and work with them, drive their acceleration, help them make connections, and get them out into the world. We then repeat. It's a rinse and repeat process. We then do a call. We get more companies in, and we repeat the process and keep it going. So we have 10 companies here at the moment, and their tenure is coming to an end in September, at which time we bring in the next group of cohort. And from an Irish perspective, we've been very successful within the Wayra group. We've invested circa €1 million in these companies, and third parties have invested over 5 million since they've come into Wayra. So as a model, it works, and it's something that we're very proud to do. I'm very proud with support we get from Telefonica, and we're equally proud to be involved in events such as this. So I'll hand it back to Tony, and thank you very much, and I hope you have a good afternoon.
Thanks very much, Carl. We have 45 minutes, so we're just going to crack on. I suppose the best way to do this is we'll have a quick chat. I'll have a quick intro of the gentlemen that are sitting down there. So thank you very much to start off with. Chats for coming in. And then we'll hand over to the audience because some huge influential and experienced people in the EdTech scene here, so we can take some questions after that. So we have TD Ciaran in the corner. We have Jonny Parks from Leaf Investments and Martyn
Farrows.
I don't know Martyn well too, that's terrible.
Yeah.
From Learnovate.
It's okay, Dave.
It's okay. Sean O'Sullivan from SOSVentures. I must say this is almost like an ultimate date for me, and I'm going to almost like an ultimate date for me.
Okay.
As a father, so as a parent of 3 kids under the age of 9, as a school teacher for 25 years, and now as a new EdTech company. So I'm going to ignore all you guys, and I'm just going to talk directly to them, if that's okay. So I want to start with Ciaran, and going from my heart, basically, with my children. So I just want to find out, the government's had a huge, not a huge amount of money, but they had good investment a few years back about technology in classrooms, talking about getting hardware going, talking about software, talking about internet connectivity. So we know it's stalled because of the economy. What's going to happen next, do you think?
Yes, there's no denying the investment has stalled, and primarily because of the economic circumstances we find ourselves in. Having said that, there is a renewed acknowledgement within the department that we need to significantly invest in EdTech, in learning in general in the future. And we are working now to prepare a strategy for that investment, a digital education strategy, which is launched. The consultation phase of that process was launched by Minister Quinn and I in Marlborough Street in our HQ just 3 months ago. So that process is underway. We'll be looking to consult with exactly the kind of person you describe yourself as: parents, teachers, people involved in the EdTech industry, and anybody who has a fascination and a passion for the use of technology in education. There is a dawning realization within the department now that there's a learning revolution underway. And rather than languishing on the fringes of it, we very much want to be part of that. In fact, I hope that we will ultimately be able to lead it. And I would see significant opportunity in the future for collaboration between teachers, and there are some exceptional teachers doing incredible work in our schools right at this point in time, despite not having the resources. They've been very creative, very innovative. A lot of them have spent their own personal, and they have money on buying equipment, buying Raspberry Pis and other such exciting stuff. And they're working to make that happen for their kids, their students right now. The challenge is for us to take what they've learned over many, many years. View organisations like CESI working for 40 years to make this happen, and then somehow inculcate that culture across the whole of the system. That's what needs to be done. It's going to need investment. We're investing in broadband in post-primary. By September of this year, every single post-primary school in the country will have 100 meg minimum broadband. But we now need to look at our primary school system. I visit primary schools where they have an excellent broadband service. I was in a primary school in East Galway 2 weeks ago where they're trying to start a coder dojo. They don't have broadband. So there's a huge potential for a digital divide to emerge in Irish society and Irish education. We need to recognise that, and we need to address that.
I'd agree with you, spot on there. I live in the countryside, so I live in Cavan, and my kids that go to the school in Cavan, their broadband is terrible. So there will be an increasing divide between the kids that don't have the broadband and the kids that do. It also has a huge effect on the companies that are trying to provide these great products into the schools if they can't access them, obviously. Yes. You're personally pretty passionate about this. So could you just expand on some of the initiatives that you're involved with at the moment?
Yes. Okay. One of the beauties of technology and things like Twitter is that you can communicate all the time, incessantly, 24/7, with these exceptional teachers and exceptional innovators worldwide. And we also have Ashoka Ireland doing exceptional work in introducing us to social entrepreneurs from across the world. And I was very fortunate to be introduced to a gentleman called John Martyn, who has pioneered a new methodology for teaching maths in primary school in Canada. We're now running a pilot of that here in Ireland, and early indications it's going to be very successful. And it's about, I suppose, increasing children's conceptual understanding of mathematics and putting paid once and for all to the myth that somebody is good at maths or bad at maths. John Martyn argues we all have the potential to be exceptionally good at maths if we're taught that subject in the correct way. Then moving on to mathematics in another shape and form, I've been very, very fortunate to work with the gentleman beside you there, Sean O'Sullivan, in an exciting new development called Mathletes, where Sean and I sat down along with a couple of other very helpful and very influential people in the department to see was there some way we could fertilise the Irish education system in the use of the Khan Academy. Sean has been a huge advocate of the excellent work that's been done by Sal Khan in the area of using technology to inspire children to learn maths in a new and different way. And we came up with the concept of Mathletes. We would ask students and schools across the country to get involved in a national competition. It's the first time anywhere in the world there's been a national online maths competition using the Khan Academy model. Sean and his team, Kelly Kirkpatrick, I don't know if you're here today, been exceptionally supportive. We're now reaching 1 in 10 children in Ireland through the Mathletes programme. I've visited schools, I've seen teachers and children inspired to learn and teach maths in a whole new different way. And for me, it's been exceptionally rewarding. We're also running a Khan Academy club. A gentleman called Bernard Kirk, who's the director of the Galway Education Centre, now has over 100 children coming to his centre every Saturday morning in a model not dissimilar to Coder Dojo to learn maths. Children are taking time out of their Saturday morning to come and learn maths. They won't take a lunch break, and they want to know things like, when are we starting algebra? I was moving on. And there's one child in Castlebar, and I met him last week, a child called Ibrahim. He's 9 years old, and since the Mathletes competition began, outside of school hours, he has been on Khan Academy for 70 hours. 70 hours. There's one other child from a very disadvantaged background who, because he has no access to broadband at home, no computing equipment at all at home, has convinced his dad to take him to the library in Castlebar every Saturday morning to spend an hour on Khan Academy learning maths. So for me, that's the revelation of when you somehow engage with children in an environment where they are completely comfortable and indeed excited and inspired, that they will engage and they will latch on and they will learn and they will take themselves to a whole new place in terms of their learning during school hours and outside of school hours. And I think that's one of the beauties of technology in the future, that it's going to facilitate that seamless transition of learning from the formal school environment to the informal home, to the park bench, to the school bus. It can happen wherever the children are if they have a broadband connection.
We were talking earlier before. I think if the students are driving it, it seems to be the secret sauce. So if the kids are the ones driving, the kids are saying to the teachers, the teachers can see them doing it, the parents can see them doing it, it seems to be the most successful way to go, and Khan Academy is very, very good for that. We experienced that when we went to the States recently and saw two teachers working with 125 students. Very simple for them to run, the kids were driving it, the kids were the ones instigating the whole program. So thanks for that. Martyn, can we move on to you? I'm going to skip Jonny for a minute, if that's okay.
He won't be happy.
Right. Martyn, can you just explain to everyone in the room what the Learnovate Centre is all about? Because I'd say there's probably a few people here that don't really know what goes on there.
Okay, thanks, Tony. I just want to start off with a very positive thing, which is I think that we do have a really proactive EdTech ecosystem in this country already. I mean, I think that we should acknowledge that fact at this point and think about how we can make that ecosystem work better. Learnovate, as I segue into what Learnovate is doing, we're playing our part in that process. So we have a role to play in terms of, we sit at the intersection between industry and the academic research community. What we're trying to do is to redefine how that role operates in the future. So we have at the moment, about 50 industry partners that we work with. A lot of them I can see sitting around the room here today. We work with 4 university partners, and what we try to do is we try to bring in the best expertise from those university partners to address research projects that are effectively defined by the industry. So in other words, we're using an innovation pull model rather than a research push model to try and get innovation out into the marketplace. And I think that we are showing that there is a very clear and open direction that you can go in with that model. You know, the industry partners that we have, in many ways, are competitors with each other, but are happy to work in an open innovation environment because they see that as raising the boat for everybody, or raising the level for everybody. So that's how we operate. I think if I was to identify a couple of things that I think we can do better, the first one is that the disappointing thing for me is that a lot of the really, really innovative companies that we work with, their focus is outside of Ireland. They look at markets outside of Ireland first because naturally they are big markets, but also they find it very difficult to sell into this national market. I think if we had a school system which was seen as being the best in the world in terms of how it uses ICT, that situation would be different. And I also think that it would be a self-fulfilling prophecy. That if countries outside of Ireland saw Ireland as leading the way in terms of how it uses ICT, that would have a massive knock-on effect in terms of the economic potential of those companies working in that space as well.
Just to jump in there, do you think it's also an opportunity for Ireland to be the EdTech hub?
I actually do, and I think that we've already gone a long way to establishing that. You know, I was in Washington 2 weeks ago describing the model that we're operating here in Ireland, and people had already heard about it and actually were fascinated to hear that it can work. I'm not sure if the reason it works here is unique to the economy that we have, the fact that we're a relatively small economy, the fact that we're a relatively open and entrepreneurial economy as well. I think that does help. But I think we've already gone a long way to establish Ireland as a centre of excellence, not just in EdTech in terms of technology to support education, but also technology to support learning as lifelong learners. So it's across the board that we're starting to grow that reputation now.
There was something interesting you said last week. We were at a meeting and you'd been to the States, you'd had a look around and see what's going on there. You were saying something about the barriers have been broken down with the one-to-one devices that have been using over there. So
yeah,
you could expand on that?
I just think that you know, Obama has done something very interesting with his Connect Ed policy, and there are 5 kind of core principles behind that. The first one is around connectivity. I think we have a similar connectivity approach here in terms of getting the broadband into schools. But one thing that we haven't done very well here, and they are doing very well in the US, is breaking down that barrier of what happens within the school, right? So what about the networking capacity of the school itself and the devices that are in the hands of children? And, you know, I sat in a lot of sessions 2 weeks ago, mostly run by teachers and what they call CTOs within school districts. And there is an acceptance now that it's almost a given that there will be one-to-one learning devices for every student. That's a given. Right? You have to have that in order to be innovative in an education system. I think we're still even grappling with that debate here. We need to move beyond that. We need to accept that there has to be one-to-one learning devices. I don't know what the magic solution is to providing that. It's clearly not that you know, every parent is going to be able to afford that. There has to be some intervention, but we have to get to a stage where we move beyond this idea that that's somehow an option or that it's somehow a choice. It's a given now that we have to have that in place.
So, Jonny, I want to move on to yourself. The opportunity seems to be pretty good for EdTech companies or development in education technology, but there's a lot of barriers in the way. So you have a huge amount of experience in this sector. The other question, one of the questions I want to ask you is not just about the K-12 market and education technology as well, the kindergarten market and the third level market as well. I was wondering if you could expand on that. But before you do that, I just want you to tell us a little bit about Leaf Investments and your new venture.
Okay, thanks, Tony. So yeah, you were talking about people working on trying to drive change through technology for 40 years. I don't think I can claim 40, but at this stage it's about 20 years of trying to drive that change, and it's a lot of the frustrations that we're sharing today that we talked about in terms of trying to make, and it could be whether it's parents, teachers, governments. There's a reluctance there to accept that this new way is better. I think the industry has evolved a lot. So we go back, we were called CBT, computer-based training. Any of those of you who remember that, then it became multimedia for a small number of years. The internet came along and everything was E, so we were e-learning. I don't hear anybody talking about e-learning today. It's all EdTech. And the funny thing is, it's the US VCs who are driving that phrase. I read yesterday that in the first quarter of this year, they've invested 500 million in EdTech startups in the first quarter of this year alone. So the first barrier we have in Ireland is, even with great people like Ciaran supporting things with SOSVentures, is a lack of capital. So one of the hats that I wear is I'm a partner of Leaf Investments, which is a fund that was set up by, again, any of you who went to school here in Ireland will be very familiar with Folland's book publishers, so one of the largest publishers here in the country. And they realized as a business a number of years ago that this change was coming. And while they're doing some innovative work within their organization, they also recognize that this disruption that we talked about this morning is going to happen. And it will happen in spite of their core business. So therefore, what they wanted to do is set up a fund that could invest in those disruptive companies outside of, and there's no connection with the main business. And they realized, having tried, I won't say and failed, but they tried to do a number of direct investments. They realized they needed to have a proper VC type structure with partners involved in the selection process and then in the process after you've invested to find the right companies and work with those companies. So I had worked with them. They approached me and said, you've been around this sector for a while. Would you help us to run that fund? And my partner here, Alan McGuire, was my colleague in our old business, Electric Paper, who ran the sales side of the business, and I ran the technology side of the business. So I said, look, I have a colleague, the two of us can work with you and do that. So for about the last 2 years now, we've been scouring initially the country, and then we've moved now to the UK. We've made a couple of investments in the UK, and we're now looking at a number of investments across Europe as well. So the 6 companies currently in the portfolio is about another 3 or 4 that are very, very close to the final stage. But we're always looking for more businesses to invest in. We're passionate about that change that can happen. All the things we talked about this morning, there really is a perfect storm. I mean, although I've been trying to drive the change for 20 years, when you think about the technology that exists, and it's not just the obvious ones like mobile and social, but big data and the analytics and being able to identify, like again was spoken about this morning, where people's weaknesses are, and even in a classroom situation, the teacher knows that on their own, each individual is working on their weaknesses. But then they can bring them together in groups and they can pair those people off, so the person who's really good at the math stuff can be paired off with the person who's good at the creative stuff and the arts. I thought it was really good today adding arts into STEM and making it STEAM. But I would ask you to go back to any of your kids or teachers and ask them what either STEM or STEAM means, and they don't understand it. So we got to present these in a way I think that people will get passionate about. And for the kids today, they're passionate about the devices in their pockets. And you've got to tell them that to be involved in an industry or a business that's going to really change the world, you should get interested in things like technology, but also in design and in marketing. So I think the challenges are still there. They're huge. It's not easy. You can't throw money at the problem, but capital is a critical part of it. The raw materials are here in this country. I do think there's somewhat of a unique environment because the businesses that did start up here in the 1980s, like CBT Systems, became SmartForce. Now Skillsoft just recently sold for another couple of $1 billion. That business has been bought and sold by 3 or 4 times, but it was started here in Ireland. Same goes for Riverdeep. All those businesses have had their financial challenges at different times, but the people who worked in those businesses are still here, and they're driving that ecosystem. And that, for me, is the most important part.
So in the ecosystem, this working space here is great for us because we're in this environment where we're learning, well, I'm learning how to work a business, how to run a business, how to get out there, how to sell, how to do all the bits and pieces that I need to do. The only disadvantage with this space is there's not other EdTech companies here because you learn so much. You get people to come in that talk specifically about EdTech or about education or whatever. Get teachers in, that's vitally important. So you've got a space now that...
Yeah, so I think it's a great point as well because there are a lot of these accelerators, incubators, it's great to have them as well. But you're right, the education business is very different. It's actually much harder to invest in as well, by the way, because by the very nature of the speed of the purchasing process, it's a slow burn. And also, people get excited by a new thing, but actually it takes a long time to prove the efficacy of that new thing. Even Brian this morning said, yeah, we're willing to try proven models or something. So how do they get proven if we can't try them out? So we realized, Alan and myself, a number of years ago that what a lot of companies need is they've got great ideas, they've got great passion and that sort of innovative startup culture, but they need the infrastructure to start up a business, they need that bit of capital, and they need a bit of expertise around them. So we've set up a hub. Certainly in Dublin, it could probably be claimed to be the first EdTech hub. There's not that many of them around the world that are specifically focused on this sector. We found a building, it took us about 6 months. We didn't have a huge amount of money, but we found a building on Mount Street which had been lying empty for about 4 years. When we pushed open the door, all the posts were sitting behind the door, and it was a bit grotty looking. And we went, we have some of our residents here who there are still infrastructure challenges, but we're working on them. But it's great because there's about 5 floors, 1,000 square feet in each floor, and people can access. There's a shared space for the kitchens and the lounge, as we call it, where everybody meets and chats about their problems as well as their opportunities. We provide HR, finance, marketing, support. Alan and myself can work with them at some more senior level. But they are all from the different sectors. So as you talked about earlier, we have businesses involved that are in sort of iPad content. We have the guys over here in Adapt2Me are doing the personalized classroom, both software and then real-time Skype-like tutors delivering tutorials. And we have businesses that do simulations for corporates. So their customers are very different, but their challenges are very similar. So the technologies are very similar. The need for instructional design and pedagogy as well as hardcore technologies. And at the end of the day, they've all the same problems that startups have. So.
Great, thanks, Jonny. Now, Sean, from seeing you on television, I had a sort of expectation of what you may be like. That's a nice way to say it. Let's start again. That's right. Anyway, let me see if I can polish over that one. Our company was in the NDRC Launchpad program before we came here. And there was an evening where you came along to talk to a number of companies. Yeah. Now, I expected you to be coming as this hard-nosed businessman, all about money and all about making this and all the rest. Yeah. But you actually didn't. You talked about education for the time you were there, and I was really surprised about that because you have this passion for education. So I want you to expand a little bit on that. I want you to tell us more about Coder Dojo, and Mathletes. Yeah. My kids are in the Coder Dojo Academy, and I go down and help them out and things like that. So the other thing I want you to give us some insight into philanthropy and what you think that role might be in education.
I hope I can keep track of all those.
Yeah, I'll give you a list. I'll probably forgot after a couple of minutes.
What was the first one again?
The first one, tell us what's your passion in education?
So I think I described, on the earlier panel, I grew up poor. My only way out of poverty was to get a job, develop a job, create an opportunity for myself, and so it started for me by going for the things that I thought I could do well, and then just training myself relentlessly on those, having a rigor. And I think we do need to expect our children to have rigor in our education system, and I think we sometimes let ourselves down when we just sort of let them play. As much as I love it, and I think it's great. What's that 3D world thing? Minecraft. I love Minecraft. Our kids are going to have wonderful minds, but that understand 3D worlds in ways that we never could. But we can't just let them let them at these toys all day. We have to actually help give them the rigor that they need. So my way out of poverty and my way, Ireland is a country which is in poverty right now. If you look at the balance sheet, and the way out of that is by creating businesses. We create opportunities for ourselves, taking more individual responsibility, not pointing to the government and say, okay, government, here's a new entitlement we think everyone should have. Not pointing to the government and say, okay, let's give more startup funding to all sorts of new people. No, it's up for the people themselves to develop the opportunities. So developing that cultural character is important, and I think education is a crucial way of developing that character as well. So I'm sort of all across the board here, I'm sorry, but another example of my commitment to education is accelerators in the first place. SOSVentures is has been at the head of the accelerator movement. We are an original investor and a backer behind Techstars, which is one of the first accelerators that exists. We're still a limited partner at Techstars. 500 startups in the US. China Accelerator, the first accelerator in China, and Hackcelerator. And actually, just last week, we were named the best institutional investor in China by TechCrunch, TechNode, beating Matrix, beating Sequoia, beating all the big brand names for venture capitalists. Even though we're here based in Ireland, but because of our commitment to startups, our commitment to educating startups, and commitment to bringing them through, the challenges. And I think accelerators are a wonderful, wonderful way of bringing people from the point of potential to the point of commercial opportunity. My own development as an entrepreneur came because it was required I was chairman of this enterprise forum report that came out earlier this year. Minister Bruton asked me to sit on a panel and recommend some things. And one of the recommendations that we made was that every STEM student have to take, before they graduate, or if they're a graduate student, as part of the graduate studies, a commercialization course, an entrepreneurship course of some kind. Because actually, those students are the ones that have disproportionate capability to affect our economy. The very last semester before I graduated college, I took a course called Principles of Entrepreneurship. I started a company. It became a couple $100 million company. It became a public company. And actually, if you've ever done this thing, have you ever typed an address into a computer and seen a map, a street map, even on your phone or Google Maps or whatever? If you have, anyone show of hands? A lot of people have done that. That was from that company that started in Troy, New York, out of Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. We were the first to pioneer that. The first 1 million people using that technology were just using our technology. And then it grew to 20 years later, 1 billion people, and 23 years later, a couple of years ago, 2 billion people using that technology. That's what STEM can do for the world. STEM actually is highly scalable. Quality of life improvements for everybody. Not everybody should go into STEM. I know everything I say seems to say everyone should be great at math. That's not requiring them all to go into STEM. You could have, you only need, say 10% of your economy to go into STEM instead of 5%. But you need the best 10% to be design engineers, and you just need you need that. And of course in Ireland we have disproportionate capability to employ these people in the STEM area because of all the technology companies that we have here. So I think that's why I care about education, is because it creates economic opportunity for people. It allows you to go from a place where you hear about these impoverished kids that don't even have a computer at home, they're living in a trailer, and they're going to learn on mathletes on Saturdays, dragging their unemployed dad to the library to help them learn math. That's what helps us advance. The kids themselves getting engaged, taking responsibility for their own education in some way. The parents, of course, helping that as well. So I'm a big believer in all of that, and I'm very grateful to Ciaran Canon and to the Department of Education for getting behind Mathletes, another one of your questions. So I'm individually the largest backer, bigger than the Gates Foundation, bigger than Google, in the Khan Academy. And that's because I believe in maths. And I believe in STEM education, and I believe in disrupting education. So, we can't sort of fool ourselves into thinking or pat ourselves on the back and say, hey, we're world class in EdTech. We're not. Sorry, guys. We may be, somewhat above average. That's great, but who cares above average? Nobody knows who's above average. They only know who's number one. We're not number one. And we've got a long, long, long way to go. If we want to be serious, if we want to be noticed, if we want to be known as number one, we're going to need to be truly innovative. We're going to need to be truly, untraditional, truly disruptive. So, I just would say that we can't lead by following. So, when we talk about following or learning from best practices, you can't just do that. You actually have to establish the best practices. And that's what gets you noticed, and that's what gets the people pointing to Ireland and saying, oh, look at what they're doing there, and look at what they're trying there, and that's really exciting. It's exciting to me that Mathletes has turned on so many thousands of kids in just the 2 months and 2 days since it launched. It launched on February 1st, and whatever day it is in April now, I don't know. But already something over 10% of the schools in Ireland are on Mathletes. Khan Academy is not a solution for everyone. It's particularly well suited for people at the age range that we're targeting at right now, which is between 11 and 18, or actually 11 to infinity, basically. Earlier products are more appropriate for other ages. So there you have it. There I am, disruptive. I'm trying to get in there, throw some punches, change the world, be disruptive, and that's what it's about for me.
Just one more question for you before we open up to the floor. When we're travelling around the States, we went to a number of places that were being funded by foundations, so they could develop philanthropy. So it doesn't seem to be as progressive here in Ireland. So, or am I wrong?
Yeah. So I'm a businessman, and you see me on Dragon's Den or whatever else, but I don't. I actually, in the EdTech space, we probably invest in 3 or 4 companies a year out of the 60 companies or so a year, or 70 companies a year that we fund. It's not that big of a focus for me from a financial or venture capital space. Not that there's not lots of opportunity. It's just that we don't have anyone that's focused on that particular area, so that's not where we're focused on some other things. On the philanthropy side, we give millions of dollars a year. SOSVentures, the O'Sullivan Foundation gives millions of dollars a year to support, philanthropic efforts in education because we think it's important. And somebody approached me earlier and said, today, and said they were an EdTech company, and I said, and they said, we would give our stuff away for free to the schools too, if we had people to fund us philanthropically. So why won't you just give us money? And so, that's a nice question, nicely thought. But the fact is, like, as an investor, I fund traction. I fund things that are working. Sal Khan, sitting in his closet, posting out YouTube videos, got to the point where he got millions of people, just with a one-person outfit. He started, I don't know if you know what the Khan Academy is. He was trying to teach his niece some math skills. He was a postgraduate, MIT, all this other stuff. And he didn't want to host, the video content. He'd just gotten home from Christmas or something, vacation back to Boston, and she wanted some instruction. So he posted it to YouTube, and she shared it with her friends. And she actually said, "You know what? It's better. You're better on YouTube than you are in person." and that's because she could rewind. She could watch it. She didn't feel the pressure of it, like all of that. So So that's where Khan Academy came from, and it got shared, and she shared it with her classmates. He did a whole bunch more videos, and millions of videos got watched a month. That's when, you know, people like myself and the Gates Foundation and Google started to notice the Khan Academy, and that's when we funded it. And so that's why it happened that way. And I think philanthropy is a great way for people to give back to the community, you know, and you know. So I happen to believe in that myself. I don't think anyone should force people to be a philanthropic or whatever. I just think it should. I think it will naturally develop if we are given an environment which creates success. You know, what happened to me is education brought me some level of success, and now I'm recognizing that. The opportunities that were extended to me, I want to have other kids growing up in any environment to have. And that's why, to me, it even makes sense to have those costs of EdTech be very, very low, so that they're very, very available to all kids from all backgrounds.
Excellent, thanks. We have 10 minutes left, so we'll open up to the floor now for as many questions as possible. So, Philip.
Yeah, that's okay. I know I'm jumping in there a little bit early. I kind of have two questions really for Jonny and Sean, but just in advance of that, Neil, myself and Tony, we were on a program in January, and as a result of that, this is one of the results of this program that we went on. And the reason that I'm kind of picking up the mic now is that we've been talking about Khan Academy and digital learning, and that we came across a school in Washington, I think it was. Or no, sorry, it was in New York. Yeah, and it was a KIPP school, a KIPP. It's not the way we use the word KIPP. But there was one teacher there who was very proactive. You might have heard him, Sean. His name is Sylvester Akros. And in the States, he's really recognized as pushing this digital learning online. And one of the things that he talked about was, look, all the kids have a device. So there's a device per kid, per school. And it didn't really matter what device, whether it was a tablet or whether it was an old laptop or whether it was a terminal. Okay, but the one thing that they did say that we went around and we witnessed was that we saw about 170 kids in a cafeteria all engaged in this one device, in their own personal device. And as I said, there was a mixture of devices. But he said one of the upshots of this that he did not see coming in any shape or form was that for this 170 kids that were using these devices and all engaged with ST Maths as well as Khan Academy and that, was that it only took 3 teachers to manage that entire 2-hour session. And as a result, with 4 other teachers freed up to do the special needs and to do the special sessions with the kids that really struggled. And he said that was one of the benefits that nobody saw coming. And I would just like to share that with you, because he didn't see it until it actually happened, that there wasn't really a requirement for 7 or 8 teachers to walk around when everyone was fully engaged. Okay, so I'd just like to share that with you, Minister, and I think that's why I think you will get the return on this investment.
I think the minister well knows that, because the minister started up a Coder Dojo out in Galway himself, and the Coder Dojo is the epitome of that. I mean, we're learning from that tremendously, and I think that it's that kind of student-to-student learning, that collaborative learning. This, you know, it's said that, you know, pushing the system to change is very hard. You know, getting the system to pull instead of push is much easier. And in fact, the same thing is true about students. Right. So pushing a student to learn is very hard. Getting them to pull
is very easy.
If you can get to that point. If you can get to that point where they're pulling the information from you, you're much more engaged. The students are much more engaged. And that's what we've learned, certainly with the Coder Dojo format. That's what we're learning with Mathletes format.
It was fascinating. The Taoiseach and I visited St. Patrick's Boys National School in Castlebar to give them their monthly award for being the top school in Ireland in Mathletes. And we walked into the classroom, as you would describe it. It was a computer room, about 25 terminals, each child sitting at a terminal, some sharing a terminal. But the teacher was sitting at the top of the class, having a chat with us while all this learning was ongoing. And there was, and every now and again, a slight intervention required from him, perhaps to get somebody onto that next level. But that is so true. And more often than not, it was the children joining each other that were supporting one another in moving on to the next level. Again, it's the model of Coder Dojo, the collaborative learning. There's one mentor in Athenry, for example, teaching Scratch to 100 kids. You know, so there's no question about it, and this is an argument we need to make, that with enhanced use of technology in education, you're going to have much more resources in terms of teachers, much more resources freed up as a result of that use of that technology.
Right. Yeah. And very quickly, and I'll pass the mic around. Jonny, very quick questions, bit direct. Is there a ceiling on how much you invest?
No, I mean, there isn't a ceiling, but typically at an early stage investment, the round will be of a certain size, and then it's follow-on investments that will affect us to how.
Would it be classed as a Series A? Would it be classed as a seed? Would it be classed as?
Again, it depends on literally. I mean, our criteria is more about it's got to be technology that's transforming education, and the size of the business is irrelevant. But the majority of the opportunities we look at would be earlier stage. So not pure seed, as in not sort of incubator type seed. We're typically involved in funding which is up to €1 million of the first round, but then again it just depends. We're looking at other ones right now which are bigger than that. So.
Okay, so we've got 5 or 6 minutes left. So is anybody in the audience specific questions for the gentleman at the front here?
Thanks. Hi, it's Margaret from Innovation Academy, UCD, and there's a lot of talk today about the K-12 and primary schools particularly, and we're aware of Coda Dojo and Khan Academy, and that's fantastic. I guess I have an observation, and I wonder if you have any solution to that. We work a lot with people who are 17 plus, and they've missed out on that. And one of the interesting things we do is, obviously we're developing innovative and entrepreneurial mindsets. As part of that, we set challenges around issues. None of those young people ever come back. They come back, they talk about water, they come back, they talk about food scarcity at the global level. They don't see education as a challenge that they can actually engage with or even solve. And so we're creating a great groundswell. And I'm wondering, how can we, because this goes to disruption and mindsets, how can we make sure that the generation that are ahead of this great generation don't block it, because they don't see that as a challenge that's addressable for them. And I'm wondering whether the educational technology that's coming out is coming out and just focusing on the system that's there and changing it incrementally rather than disrupting it. So how can we get to that particular segment of the market, the 18 to 27? How can we use educational technology to be disruptive there, and how can we get ideas coming out of there built on using the technology, not for STEM, because that's easier, but for the softer skills, like how can we use it to change mindsets? Because what we do, we can't scale unless we use technology. And when we use technology, we lose because we don't understand it well enough, some of the softer skills, and focusing on that.
Well,
yeah, I'll have a go anyway. I think, first of all, I'd take 18 to 27 in 2 different groups. If you take, so the first group is, let's say, I'm going to call it college, but so whatever they're going to do education-wise after they've left school, before they're in the workplace. Like we've invested in a business called Blickbook that is a social learning platform for higher education, so for university or vocational level students. And what that's trying to do is harness the technology that they are very comfortable with, like Facebook, both on mobile and desktop platforms, but using it to encourage them to really effectively collaborate around whatever it is that they're studying. And it's structured in a way that again, go back to the educator is there, but they're in the background. And the students are encouraged to help each other, just the way as we all would have done, sitting around, in my case, the buttery or whatever, asking people, what did you get for this and how did you solve that problem? They're doing that online. They're doing it not just with people in their own class, but actually they're doing it online with other people in not just their university, but in other universities who are studying marketing or who are studying finance or law. And they're asking questions about, say, what are the relevance of the 4 Ps in marketing in today's more dynamic environment? And somebody in Edinburgh will say something, and then somebody in Shanghai will contribute to the conversation. But the educator is still there and is moderating in a certain way, but there's a particular skill to that moderation that they won't jump in and say, Johnny's wrong, but they will, if necessary, come in and say, well, what Mary is saying is really good, and actually that creative idea she has over there is probably something that all you techies over there who are having a fight about something else need to think about, because this other person is thinking in a different way. So it's use of the technology in a way that they're comfortable from a technology perspective, as in Facebook, but just trying to think about how that fits into their learning process. The next phase then is the workplace. And again, we talked about this in the group I was in at lunchtime. There's a big issue with that generation coming into the workplace. And I don't know whether this is because when I grew up in Ireland, you had to get a job just to get through college, and you were forced to work in a garage or a bar, whatever it was. So from a very early age, you were forced into the structure of work. I think the challenge that some people we've encountered anyway, and I know speaking to other people, employing people, have the same challenge, that people have come into the workplace without having had that through that 18 to 27 year time frame. And that therefore is a bit more of a struggle to them to know how I'm supposed to engage and work with people in the workplace. So a program that we talked about at lunch that I think the American Chamber is working on is some kind of a transition program from your university into the workplace. And to do that in collaboration with employers, so that whether it's attention to detail, whether it's focus on particular tasks, whatever it is, which are still requirements when you're in the workplace, even if you're going to be great at creativity and problem solving. So I think there are roles for the technology, but who's going to pay for those is always going to be a challenge, both for people trying to sell into higher education. Budgets are always a challenge. We've already got a technology platform, is what you'll hear, and it's probably a 15-year-old learning management system, which isn't maybe fit for purpose, what I described, but you've got that. You can't replace that because it's already committed to a 5-year budget.
Tony, can I just jump in there as well? Steve Duggan made a very good point this morning that there's a tendency with educational technology to start with the technology and then try and apply it to an old style of learning. Actually, what you need to do is define the kind of learning methodology that you want to use and then look for the technology. Often it doesn't exist because the technology has been built around an old way of doing things. We had just started to work with a project, a community education project out in Tala, a place called Onkason, which is very much a peer-to-peer learning project. They're looking to create a virtual community college. I think Pat Rabbit was out there last week launching the project. Initially, when they came to us, they said, what we're going to do is we're going to do this virtual community college, and we're going to use Blackboard as the solution. And we said, well, Blackboard won't give you the support that you need to deliver the learning methodologies that you currently have, very much around peer-to-peer, that kind of stuff. Let's start at the beginning. Let's start with the methodologies that you have and then try and design a system around that. So that's what we're going to do with them. So it's not necessarily always a case of just using the off-the-shelf technologies that exist. Define what you want the technology to deliver and then try and find somebody to partner with who will help you to build that as well. So maybe that's a different way of looking at it.
Okay, we have another question.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Alan Wilson. From my accent, you can tell I'm not from just North Dublin. I'm from Larne in Northern Ireland. Bit in common, I run the local Coder Dojo in Larne Town. I founded it and started it up with 6 other mentors, so I'm right there. Main thing I've observed this morning, being from up there in a different education system, similar but not the same, I'm seeing a massive groundswell, and I'm hearing a groundswell from everybody at the bottom layer, the mid layer, and the layer just above that, trying to change things. And it's very, very impressive what I've heard this morning and in this session. But I'm brought back to measurement drives behaviour. You're measured on a leaving cert, you're measured on your degree pathway, your master's, your PhD. So these measures are put in place, and there's great structures around those measures in here and across the world. How do you break those measures down to be more appropriate to what the groundswell of opinion I'm hearing here this morning is meant to do? So I'd be interested in someone taking, how do we change the measures?
Okay, how long have we got? Sean spoke earlier on about ensuring that we preserve the purity of intellectual rigor in what we do, and that it isn't good enough to have kids playing Minecraft all day long. That's absolutely the case. But equally so, your point is so valid. How do we facilitate this evolution, significant evolution that's going on in education provision, and somehow, and we shouldn't be trying to adapt the old measure, exam, test structure to that. What we're trying to do in the Department of Education at the moment is look at our whole junior cycle, roughly aged 13 to 15, 12 to 15, and remove that end of 3-year cycle state exam, so that you're not forcing children and forcing teachers to teach and absorb an incredible amount of knowledge and then regurgitate it at will with a pen and paper over a number of hours. And that is the only assessment of how successful you have been in your first 3 years in post-primary, and that is the only measure of how successful you have been as a teacher for those young people. So what we're trying to do is determine ways of ensuring that the intellectual rigor of what we're doing and the academic quality we're doing is still of a very high standard, but change the model that doesn't put kids into this high-pressure exam environment that obliged my son 2 years ago to learn off 11 Irish essays by heart in order to be able to function in that exam environment. We all remember having sufficient knowledge of our Irish language and sufficient creative skill to be able to write a bloody essay. But the point is, at this point in time, we have forced our teachers and forced our children, because we've placed so much store on this one exam, which in the real world has little or no meaning, and we've acknowledged that that isn't the way to go. So there needs to be a certain degree of risk-taking. We need to acknowledge now that rather than some would argue that if we're too courageous in implementing new change, we're going to somehow undermine our kids' education. I would argue if we're too timid, that's when we're really going to undermine them. It's a huge, huge conundrum, a huge challenge, but it's certainly at post-primary level, in that first 3 years, we're trying to address it here in Ireland. It won't be easy, and it needs a lot of cooperation and collaboration from everybody involved in education. It needs parents to believe, to have the courage to step outside what they think is a pretty secure, safe environment of children, test, result. That isn't the way to go in the future, I would argue.
Sorry, I'm going to have to wrap this up. Unfortunately, there's a huge amount of comments, a huge amount of ideas in the room, and it could go on for another half an hour, probably an hour. But we do need to go back. I think this is the start of a really interesting conversation. I just want to ask one question while we're here. Are there any teachers in the room, by the way? One.
Two.
Right. So maybe next time we have this conversation, we should have an equal amount of teachers, parents.
Can I just say finally, if we don't have teachers right at the heart of this conversation, we're going absolutely nowhere. Right at the heart of it. Yeah.
Well, can I put that? If the pupil isn't at the heart.
Oh, absolutely. Of course. Yeah. Okay. There are, yeah. Okay.
I'm on a C- now. If they were giving A's and A pluses, I'm on a C-, so we really have to go. I apologise. But thank you very much for everybody for coming along.
Thank you.